Hi, I'm Glow, and it is my esteemed pleasure to welcome you to About the Author, the companion episode to Excerpts podcast. Since it's the first edition, we're going to do things a little bit different. This isn't how it's always going to work, and every About the Author is going to be different, tailored to the individual author. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited to welcome the author, Miss Jacqueline White. Hi, Jacqueline.
Hello. Hi, Glow.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to be doing this episode with you.
So, before I start asking you questions and delving into this stuff, I want to tell the audience what I know about you. So, Jacqueline White is the author of The White Fence and A House of Cards. So, Jacqueline, tell me your author's story. When did you discover that writing was something that you wanted to do?
I don't ever remember not being a writer. When I was a little kid, before I even knew how to read, I would get the picture books and I would make up my own stories to go with the pictures. And then as I got older and I learned how to write, I would start jotting down notes. I was an avid reader from a very young age. And I know that one of the things that bothered me is I'd get to the end of books and they didn't end the way that I wanted them to. And so I would start to make up my own stories so that I could make the endings that I wanted to. And as I got older, I realized that there weren't very many characters like myself. And so I wanted to write them into being.
Oh, that's super cool. Do you remember the first book printed with words that you fell in love with?
I remember the book. I don't remember its name. It was a book about a lion who had a rainbow tail. And I wish that I could remember the name of it, but it's been so long. It was a picture book.
So you are the author of The White Fence and A House of Cards. Tell me a little bit about The White Fence.
Okay, so The White Fence is a historical fiction novel that's set in the 1960s South. And it's really about falling in love for the first time, set against the backdrop of the civil rights movement. I know that a lot of times people know about the stories that happened in Birmingham and Montgomery. We know about the Montgomery bus boycott and what transgressed in Bessemer. But the integration happened all over the South. And so I wanted to bring a different kind of perspective from like a lesser known story brought to life.
The story is actually set in a town called Bakersfield, Alabama, and it directly parallels a very real town in Alabama. Can you tell me about that town?
Yes, the town that Bakersfield is modeled after is Huntsville, Alabama. Obviously, if you've been to live in Alabama, you know that it's Huntsville, Alabama, and I give some, I guess, cute little nods to it. Like one of the main roads that goes through Huntsville is Jordan Lane, and I changed it in the book to be River Lane, just to, like River Jordan, just like a little quick nod to the fact that it's Huntsville. And I also stole the backstory. One thing about Huntsville, Alabama is that it had its explosive population increase because of the existence of the Redstone Arsenal. And prior to that, during World War II, German scientists were brought to Huntsville to do work on the Saturn V rocket. And so that's how Huntsville became known as the Rocket City. And that is directly responsible for Huntsville's incredible growth.
Does Huntsville have any significance in your actual existence?
Yes, like Tracey, I started off in Illinois, and then when my parents divorced, we moved south to Huntsville, Alabama, and it was a bit of a cultural shock because in Huntsville, Alabama, it's I think that the racial makeup is like 60-40 black and white, 40% being black, and the town that I came from was all white. We were one of the few black families in that entire town, so we went from having only a handful of kids per grade that were Black, brown, or children of color, and then to going to an all Black elementary school where even the teachers were Black. And before then, I had never had a Black teacher. I didn't know that you could be a teacher and be Black. It was a learning experience. It's life changing, I guess.
I can definitely see how that shift would be life changing. Now, you mentioned Tracey and you being like Tracey. And if you haven't listened to the excerpt, the actual podcast, then you probably don't know who Tracey is. So who's Tracey?
So Tracey is a fictionalized version of myself. She is a 14-year-old precocious young girl who dreams of going to Harvard even while her neighborhood burns and her schools are forcibly integrated. She has one goal in life, and that's to become a Harvard-trained lawyer. And she doesn't intend to let anything stand in her way of achieving that goal.
Really?
Yes.
So with that being said, I heard a little rumor that you might have brought a copy of the book with you.
Yes.
You want to introduce Tracey to us in your own words?
So I'll just start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. Sorry, I'm a cornball. I love musicals. I'm a Ham fan, and a Rent head.
Well, before you Ham fan, I caution you, do not throw away your shot.
Chapter 1, City Limits. On I-565, just past mile marker 340, in the place of where a prominent cotton field once stood, construction of a tourist welcome center had begun. The center's job, once it's completed, is to share with the world, or at least those who pass through this part of it on their way to somewhere else, the tale of how Bakersfield was pulled from obscurity and turned into a space exploration mecca in just a couple dozen years. This nearly impossible feat had happened with nothing more than a little ingenuity, luck, determination, and several $100 million in government dollars. For now, though, beside the rocket that stood as a nod toward Bakersfield's new nickname, the Space Base, sat a highway green sign that read, "Welcome to Bakersfield, Alabama, a fine place to call home." It was this very same sign that had stood guard on this very same stretch of road where my mom and I had first made this drive years before. Then, for reasons known only to her at the time, she had packed up everything we'd owned and moved us from our home in Wilmington, Illinois, to head south. It was on this road, too, that I got my first taste of true Southern hospitality. Having never seen a whites-only sign before, I'd mistakenly used the wrong restroom. For my ignorance, I'd been boxed on the ears by the shop owner's screeching wife and shouted back to our Ford. My mom, instead of consoling me, had simply remarked, "Things are different down here." That said, she started our car, turned it in the direction of our new house in Bakersfield, a place I'd never call home. That was the summer of 1960. 5 years later, Bakersfield was tentatively taste testing this thing called integration. The whites-only signs had since been taken down, and legislation had been passed to remind the South that, yes, the Constitution did apply to its Black citizens as well, yet little else had changed along this road or in the mindsets of the people since the day that I discovered that I was not quite good enough to squat in the same facilities that a white woman could. I was the first to see the smoke. It appeared unexpectedly on our left, a few miles past the "Welcome to Bakersfield" sign. In the fading light, the smoke looked blood red as it rose ominously from the northwest like a thin, snaking serpent. I tensed at the sight of the smoke, the hairs rising on the back of my arms before my mind had even comprehended that something was altogether wrong. My best friend's brother Marcus, who had, in between his crooning of the Four Tops as I Can't Help Myself, been keeping a careful eye on the time, his speed, and the sun, lest we get caught on the highway at night, fell silent as he, too, noticed the smoke. I watched his eyes track to the spot that had drawn mine. "What do you think that is?" I whispered. "Nothing good," he assured me. Patrice, who was still mentally in Atlanta, was too occupied with her recently purchased clothes to have noticed anything. She looked up at his pronouncement, clueless. What's not good? She questioned. Absently, Marcus pointed at the spot in the distance. That's the trick, ain't it? Patrice was the first to figure out. The trick was what everyone, black and white, called the Bakersfield Black District, the area where the majority of the black schools, a few of the homes, and most of the businesses were located. You don't think that it's on fire, do you? Neither Patrice nor Marcus answered me, afraid to speak the words would make them true. Tensely, Marcus took the next exit off of the highway, as if this was just the normal end to a long trip and we hadn't seen the smoke. No, Patrice screeched. Don't go home, Mark. Take us to Cherry Street. Mama said to come straight home, he protested. She'd skin me alive if we get caught up in. We won't. Just drive by, she urged. Don't you at least want to know? Marcus hesitated, indecisive, but after a block, his curiosity must have gotten the better of him. He turned the Gordons' car down College Drive, the street that ran past the newly designated Alabama University Bakersfield campus, heading away from our neighborhood and towards the trick. It seemed almost as soon as he'd made the decision, a bitter scent invaded the car, confirming that something was burning. The roads heading toward the trick were oddly empty for it to be the last Saturday night before school started back. That wasn't a good sign. Life was lived out on the streets. Few homes had air conditioning, so it was often just as hot inside as it was out, and you couldn't hear any good gossip locked behind the walls of your house. Missing, too, was the steady foot traffic of those that were coming home from their jobs and the children who were trying to get in the last minutes of play before they were called inside. The closer we got to Cherry Street, though, the more crowded the streets became. Marcus seemed to realize that we'd have to get rid of the car if we wanted to get any closer, and it was easy to see just how much he didn't want to do that. After a long moment's thought, he pulled the car to a stop on Hitch Row. Stay here, he instructed, but Patrice had already swung the door open and was out of the car, dragging me along with her. Pat! She paid her brother no mind, and I gave him a shrug before I got pulled into the crowd. Marcus had no choice but to follow after us as we made our way towards Cherry on foot. The trick was on fire.
What real life aspects of Huntsville are found in the trick? Are there any?
So the Black church had a big, strong influence on life in Huntsville, Alabama, as it often does in southern cities concerning the Black population. And so I do kind of imitate the influence of the church in the book. The trick, as far as I know, I put it in there for around the Terry Heights neighborhood. A lot of the businesses back then were Black owned with segregation. However, when integration came, all of those Black owned businesses they kind of closed down and didn't open back up. And then you had the liquor stores and everything moving into these neighborhoods. So it really changed the way the neighborhoods developed after that. It's a drawback of integration. One thing that happened was that when Black people could go to white-owned businesses, Black-owned businesses started to close down.
I would assume that white-owned businesses have cheaper prices and are perceived as better quality because of their proximity to whiteness. Would that be an unfair statement?
I wouldn't say it's an unfair statement. I would say that would be like a true statement. When I was growing up, my dad was in the military and he was an officer. And as a child, I didn't realize that military bases are very segregated based off of enlisted versus officer class. And so as a kid, there was like two pools on the base, and we always wanted to go to the good pool, the quote unquote good pool. And the good pool was the officers' pool, and the officers made more money than the enlisted class. So you would see that same dynamic. There was more resources to put into the white businesses. Also, there behind the scenes, let's just say that certain neighborhoods would protest if certain businesses moved into those neighborhoods. So those businesses were concentrated more in the less desirable neighborhoods.
What started the fire?
Oh,
why did the fire even happen?
Yeah, so you'll find out very shortly after that one of the things, the cause of the fire was that a Black teenager ran into the white wife of the ex-police chief. And as you know, like with cases such as Emmett Till, and even into the future, when Black boys make mistakes, it can end up being catastrophic. And the citizens of the town, the white citizens, I should say, wanted retribution for this teenager accidentally running into this woman. And when the family wouldn't give him up to the lynch mob that came for him, they set fire to his father's barbershop.
Oh, that sounds a lot like Tulsa. I'm sorry. Did I say that? I did. I meant it. So I've read the book and a lot of very interesting things happen. So Tracey is this determined, studious young lady. She's 14, but when you read her, she kind of jumps off the page as a lot more mature than 14. And she's just got this tunnel vision. This is this thing that she wants until there's a crack in the tunnel.
Yes. So she's, like you mentioned, she's 14 and she has her eyes set on the prize. However, at 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, we think that we know everything that's going to happen in the world. And, you know, we know everything at age 14 and don't tell us nothing. But part of growing up is falling in love. And Tracey did not expect that to be part of her story. Tracey has, I guess you could call him a nemesis. He is the son of a firefighter. And on the very first day of her first day of high school, she runs, his best friend runs into her. And they have an altercation. And then after that, he just seems to be this presence in her life as their worlds keep colliding into each other. And Tracey is super focused on the future, on what she wants from life. And Derek is a self-described class clown who spends as much time as possible trying to interrupt class, to make people laugh, to disrupt everything. He's the exact opposite of what Tracey stands for.
So let's meet Derek.
Okay, so this is from chapter 11, Inner Space, and it is after they work together on a project over the summer.
Okay.
Or I'm sorry, they're working together on a project over the summer. I walked alone to the signing table, got my name tag, and was told to go across the street to find Bill Massey to get set up on a project. Bill was a sturdily built older man with a full head of gray hair who was trying to do about 20 things at once. When I introduced myself, he shook my hand hurriedly while feeding directions to someone else. If you'll see my junior assistant, he'll be more than happy to get you started, he said brusquely, before turning to someone else who demanded his attention. Who's the junior assistant? I questioned to the air. That'd be me, a remarkably familiar voice announced. If Derek was surprised to see me, he concealed it better than I. He gave a smile, pulling his hammer off his tool belt, spinning it around in his hand, gunslinger style. Tracey, he said, pronouncing my name slowly. Out of all the construction sites in all the towns in all the world, she walks onto mine, he quoted with a certain flair. You're one of the last people I expected to see on my terrain. That made for the two of us. I looked at him spinning his hammer and was tempted to say draw. Junior assistant to the director, I questioned instead. He stopped looking sinister and smiled. He had such a nice smile, I noticed. I wonder why I hadn't noticed it before. Yeah, I run the show here. He hitched his blue jeans up at the waist, hooking his fingers in the loops in a way that made him look very rugged. He posed before laughing it all off. Really, it just means I'm a glorified helper. I work with the first-time volunteers, keep them out of the way, see that they got something to do. I make sure all the house leads have all the things they need, make sure everything is getting done, and if there's need for more workers on a project, I get them to where they need to be. That all sounded very responsible. I was a little thrown off. He holstered his hammer. Is this the first house that you've worked on? I nodded. Ever do anything like this before? Me and my friend once tried to build a tree house, I offered helpfully. He smiled, and for some reason his smile made me smile. We never finished it, though, I admitted. He tilted his head to the side, giving me an appraising look. Well, this here might be a little bit harder than building a tree house, and if you come to build, you might be a little disappointed. The old guys don't like to relinquish their hammers to the youngins, especially the females, and if you ain't on a crew, you don't do any of the frame building or setting up. There didn't seem as if there was much left to do after that. So what will I be doing, I wondered. We never have enough gophers, he suggested with a shrug. You don't get to build, but we always need to run water to the crews, bring nails, shovels, spades, and the like off the truck, hold the end of the wood when it's being cut, that sort of thing. I can get you set up installation when the frames are in place, but I'll be honest, it itches like crazy and it ain't much fun. The following Saturday, I spent most of the day doing stucco work. Around noon, his growing familiar shadow fell across my work, and I looked up in expectation. Working hard? Derek questioned, a familiar hint of teasing in his voice. Hi, I said in response. Yes. Well, it's lunchtime, he announced. Time to take a break. I just want to finish this, I said, wiping a bead of sweat from my forehead. He shook his head. Never quit on a project, do you? Well, you have to take a break. Food here, and we're about to bless it. I'll be right there. Derek gently lifted me up by the forearm. You don't have to eat lunch right now, he said leanly, taking the tool out of my hand. All you have to do is come across the street while we say grace, and then you can come right on back. You can eat later if you want. Thank you, I remarked. He nodded, awkwardly it seemed. My pleasure, he said slowly. I take it you enjoy the build since you keep coming back. What do you think? I paused to consider while I tried out the food. This is what community is supposed to be about, I said in appreciation. Black and white churches alike had sent workers and helped sponsor the building. There had been no animosity as far as I could see, just a sense of shared determination. People mutually helping each other, no matter what race, religion, creed. Could you imagine what the world would be like if we were all willing to work together to help each other? So people really talk like that, he observed with a chuckle. And even though he laughed, it didn't feel as if he was laughing at me. Nah, I know what you mean. You're saying it'd be nice if people could just see people as people instead of all these other concepts we try to make them. You know, like if brainy know-it-alls could see handsome construction guys as people worth getting to know. I nodded vigorously. Exactly. Or if show-off, cocky class clowns could see driven, intelligent women as people worth listening to. I returned. Derek held his hand out for me to shake. I'm Derek, he said. Tracey, I responded. We shook hands jokingly, equally amused. Nice to meet you.
They really are different as night and day. And so I love the way that they kind of played off of each other. We're going to shift gears a little bit because the white fence has a friend.
Yes.
It's called a house of cards.
Yes.
What can you tell us about a house of cards?
So without giving away too much of the white fence, a house of cards is Tracey after she's graduated from high school, in college and ready to take the world take the world by storm. You know, she thinks that she can make it through what's going on in the world by keeping her head down and in books. And when the world is trying to define who you are, she learns that being herself is its own revolution.
I like that. Being yourself is its own revolution. That is such a powerful statement. You are working on more projects because you're always writing.
Yes. So I started writing. I can't remember when I started writing, but I was published for the first time when I was 10 years old. Mm-hmm. And when I was in my teens, I started working on my very first book called The Game of Life. I had this goal to finish a book before S.E. Hinton, and because she wrote The Outsiders when she was 16 years old, and so I had set a personal goal to finish my book before I turned 16, and I did. I finished it when I was 15 and got it copyrighted. I didn't get it published because I didn't have the kind of support system in place that S.E. Hinton had. So it was never published, but I around that same time I started winning writing contests for in my state, and that was pretty much just the kick I needed to ensure that I never stopped writing, and actually started writing The White Fence and A House of Cards because they were both written together. I started writing that when I was 16.
Really? 16?
Yes.
So that is why the characters feel very much crystallized in that, or not crystallized, that's not the word I want to use. It feels like they really are that age. And you know how sometimes adults try to write younger characters and it reads as an adult writing a younger character. That bit that you just shared with us, I feel like that's the kind of conversations that kids have, like, hey, and the girl's all like, and
so I incorporated a lot of the feelings and sentiment that I used to have on my own crush when I was that age. In fact, I'll share with you a little secret. The poem that I included in the book is really close to the poem that I gave to my crush, but it was one of those poems that I did write for them explicitly, but after I gave it to him, I realized that it was one of those type of poems that a lot of people should know about. And so ever since I wrote that poem, I have been giving it to graduating seniors. One of the last lines of the poem is, "No matter how old you get, don't be afraid to dream." And so it became my thing to pass that out to graduating seniors. And I wanted to include that in the book because when you are young and you have a crush, it takes over your whole life. Like, you think that it is life or death, that you have to be with this person or whatnot. You know, you get, teenagers are their own special being, and I wanted to capture that.
that is so beautiful. Now, you mentioned poetry.
Yes.
I'm not supposed to tell this, but how can I give you the inside scoop if I don't tell you? I've actually had the opportunity to hear some of Miss White's poetry. And I was wondering, I know that it's not a thing that you do as often, but I was wondering if you'd tell us a little bit about you and your relationship with poetry.
So I got into the slam poetry scene when I was a junior in college. The poetry scene was called Common Ground, and I'm going to do a small bit of name dropping here. So the group that we used to do the slam poetry with, it was more of an open mic. And one of the people who used to do the open mic was Sneakwa Martin, who is now doing it up big in Hollywood. And I remember watching New Girl and seeing her. I was like, that chick looks familiar. And I was like, oh, I remember listening to her play the guitar and do her thing back at the University of Alabama. So there's that. And then after in college still, I represented the University of Alabama at the College Union Poetry Slam Invitational. And since then, I have performed poetry from Washington, D.C. to Washington State. I performed at the International World Poetry Slam Invitational, which is IWIPS, and WOWPS, which is the Women of the World Poetry Slam Invitational. Miss Hollins was not supposed to bring up my poetry because it's a separate personality kind of. But yes, I have done poetry for a long time. And it is something that I do enjoy doing. I slam poetry versus writing poetry, and I actually enjoy doing both. And because I know how much she wants to hear it, I will go ahead and do just a little bit of one of my favorite slam poems, which is "Make Love," and it is one of my older ones, so it doesn't exactly go with slam conventions now, but so here it goes. "Make Love." My mom always told me that if you don't have something, then you should make it yourself. I want to make love. I want to make love. No, not as in have sex. I actually want to make love. Like I literally want to dissect the emotion and dice it up. Turn into a token notion, maybe cheapen it to $1. That way anyone with a few coins can try it. Those that are on top of their game or maybe a little down in their luck can still taste the ecstasy of her impassioned flames and don't have to worry about it being enough. I want you to be able to buy warmth and compassion as if it were Willy Wonka's gobstoppers on the shelf everlasting. I want it to be the number one, gotta have Oprah's wish list, give me now please thing. I want it to be the number one item under every Christmas tree. I want it to be the main attraction at your next birthday party. And I want it to be the champions basket of the Olympics because winning should be your sole ambition. I want it to be the most texted about, the most talked about, the most handed out. Hell, I just want it to be it. I want to make love.
Y'all, if you ever, well, I since I've let the cat out of the bag, if you ever have an opportunity to attend a poetry slam, please go and support those amazing artists. And if you ever get to hear this one, please, 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 because it's actually super amazing to get to see her come to life. Now, I actually met you, gosh, no, it's been longer than that.
It has to have been longer than that because I've been in California for about 6 years now.
You know what? It was about 11 years ago now.
Wow.
It was 11 years ago. And one of the most profound things I remember is, I felt like you just published The White Fence and you self-published and you were trying to get your book out. And you guys, we worked in the same place. And you would go into the break room and she would come alive. Like she would be this normal, mild-mannered person, just doing her job, doing what she's got to do to pay the bills. But then when she's outside of that space, you would get to see a glimpse of who she was. And I think that's one of the things that attracted me to you as a person, because the first piece she ever did for me was Make Love. And I'm just like, this comes out of an actual, like this came out of your actual brain. And then she's like, oh yeah, and I wrote a book. You wrote a book? And she was just, I probably shouldn't tell this, but I'm going to tell you publicly that that's when I knew you were dope.
Can I share with you like one little thing?
Yes.
Okay, so when I've been living in Fresno for about 6-7 years. It all blurs together. So I didn't grow up here. I moved here. I came here by accident, and I'm not used to people recognizing me. So I keep getting recognized for my poetry. And I was standing in line at a food truck, and a kid comes up to me and he's like, hey, are you that dope poet that we saw at Bitwise? And I'm like, I guess I'm that dope poet.
So with that being said, because it's no secret that clearly you're brilliant and your mind works in a way that an average mortal person doesn't. But how do you keep yourself grounded and not get too full of yourself, if that makes sense?
I'm 100% full of myself. I'm a writer. We're narcissistic to the nth degree. I mean, you have to be to think that your words are important enough to put down on paper. But see, I think that one of the things that we gloss over in life, or one of the lies, the big lies that we tell ourselves, is that only certain people are allowed to tell stories. You know, I hate to say gatekeeping, but there's a certain path that you have to go to get published in most instances. And so we hear the same stories over and over again because it's this convinced that this is what sells. But a great example is right now a movie's coming out about that's based off of a 150 Twitter conversation that a woman posted on Twitter, and the story was just fantastic and incredible, and the storytelling was amazing. And the thing is that everybody has a story that they need to tell. Everybody has a life that's worth writing about. And one of the biggest things that that fuels my writing is that I was a history major in college, history and political science, and I think about the future all the time. I think about the books that we still read from the past and what that says. And if you've ever actually sat there and thought about it, the books that we still read are always about wealthy people. The Shakespeare, Pride and Prejudice, The Great Gatsby. It's all about wealthy people who are part of the same families over and over again. And I I don't want the future to forget us. You know, we were here, we existed, and I want to share our stories. I want everyone to share their stories because everyone has a story that's worth hearing.
Outside of being a poet, being a narcissist, something I don't know anything about, but I hear it's a full-time job. What else are you doing? And are you working on anything new? What can we expect?
So, like Clark Kent, I have a day job. But in between doing my day job, I'm currently working on my Master's of Fine Arts, my MFA in creative writing, because like I said, it's gatekeeping. You gotta check certain boxes. And actually it's funny. I decided to pursue my MFA because of Jane the Virgin. Because I've always written, but I've never allowed myself to believe that writing could be a career. And I decided that, hey, since I moved all the way across the country, I came to California with my tribute loaded up with everything I own that could fit in it and $1,200 in the bank. And since I did all of that, I owe it to myself to go 100% into writing. So I'm currently working on my MFA and my thesis for my MFA. And I also just finished another one of my books. It's called The Pilot Season. And it is, I would say it's kind of like a Glee-like it's a book about a Glee-like television show and the world that arises out of it. It starts on the 100th episode, and then it goes back to the very beginning of the show, 5 years prior in 2008, and it goes from you get introduced to all the characters. You see how they begin to come into their own, how they develop, and it's been one of the funnest projects that I've ever done.
Really, what's made it one of the most fun projects you've ever done?
Well, it's a lot of things. Like I came up with one of those bad 2000 raps. Like everyone knows those. There was like an abundance of girl groups and guy groups in the early 2000s, and they all had yeah. So I came up with one of those cheesy 2000 raps, and it's like every time I read it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cheesy. This fits so much. And but like also one of the things that sucks about being a writer is that you come up with all these things that you have to discard. But because I'm simultaneously developing the show and the book, if I cut something out, I can put one in the script or in the book, or I can actually go through my writing process. So like if I cut a line that doesn't make sense, I can actually have the character saying why he cut the line. Like the dialogue doesn't make sense, or this character shouldn't say that. And so it's really just fun. And like it going back and finding all the information I needed to put in this book. Sometimes you'll do research for 3 hours over 10 words that you put into it. Like I have divided all of the scenes up that are in the script that you will never read. But so I know that there are 109 speaking roles. There's 17 locations, 117 locations. I have to go back and look at it. There's 26 interior locations. 34 exterior locations. I had to know where they were on the lot when they were filming it. I had to know production schedules. I had to know what the main cast got paid for the pilot season. Even though you will never know that information, I had to check and double check to make sure that they could afford this. It's been fun. Like I will never stop enjoying talking about it. And there are so many characters that I get to develop for this book. And the fun thing is, I'm not just developing the book characters, I'm developing the show characters too. So the main character, Brennan, plays a character called Kale, short for Caleb. And so I have to develop Brennan as a character. And then I have to understand what Kale does as a character. And so it's a lot of fun. And it's just something I enjoy doing.
Oh, that's so cool. So you got your mic. I see it there.
Yes.
And you mentioned you wrote a cheesy girl group rap.
Oh, no, you can't do that.
Oh, but I can. And I
No.
did. I did. We just need a little bit. Just a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit. Please.
Okay.
Come on, you know you want to do it.
I am never going to forgive you for this.
That's okay. You got forever to be mad at me.
Okay.
You need to get in character. You need a second to get in character. Like,
No, I wasn't expecting this. So
you brought it up. So since you brought it up, it is fair game.
Okay, so a little bit background on this particular scene. Raquel and Hammond, who are both industry, they have been in the industry since they were little. Raquel is the kind of character who you always see in TV shows and you never remember until you see her again and then again and again. And Hammond is someone who has name recognition, and he's the dancing guy. And they find out that they have a little bit of history together. Raquel is in a girl group called GSS, which stands for Girls Standing Strong, which is everything that has to do with the 2000s. And it turns out that Hammond took one of her group mates to prom back when they were in high school. And so they're in the dance studio. They're getting ready to learn their parts for the scenes that they're going to film. And so that's where this comes from. And I'm going to give you just a very small taste, very, very small taste of it.
But you have to say it like you mean it. Say it with your chest, man. Come on. You gotta give it to us.
I'm not giving it to you, but
you have to. Like you cannot not do this. You can't half do this. You gotta do it if you're gonna do it.
All right. I make no promises. Hammond shook his limbs out, sizing Raquel up in the mirror. He bent into a plie. You ever take ballet? Raquel watched his graceful movements. A long time ago. Heel toe hop and a little tutu and pigtails long time ago, or GSS long time ago? Raquel tossed a hand on her hip in a very practiced way. What you know about GSS? GSS, Hammond did one of the girl group's signature poses. He kept the pose as he recited the creed, is about girls supporting each other and standing strong through any adversity they might face together. Raquel kept her face blank. Is that right? What else do you know? He did a side jump. I know Siren's got the voice that makes you jump in, and Fierce has got the beat that keeps it pumping. Blaze stays on the mic. You know she keeps it tight. It was automatic for Raquel to start dancing and singing the next line, pumping her fists in the air. And Storm has got the party that keeps it rocking all night.
This is how we do it.
This is how we do it.
Like it's that it puts you. So the pilot season is not out yet. There's nowhere that you can buy it. And so I don't. Not yet.
Not yet.
but it's coming. And
Yes.
when you get a chance, you've got to read this book because so The White Fence and A House of Cards is one kind of world, and then this is a completely different world, and the themes are very, very different. And so with that being said, tell me a little bit about how you select the things that you want to write about. Do they just come to you, pop up in your head and jump on your bed, or do you see something like, I don't know, a glass of water and go, ooh? So, like, how do you get there?
So with The White Fence and House of Cards, and there's a planned third book, I guess a trilogy. There's a planned third book called Song of Our Lives, and that was all one book at one point. It was this super colossal, huge book called Until Death Do Us Part. And then it was suggested that I break it up into 3 different books. And that book idea came to me literally. I went to sleep, I woke up, and I was like, that would make a really, really good book. And years later, I finished it. And I want to say this about the books. I wrote a book that I would want to read. Every time I open it, I feel like Tracey's, my friend. I can relate to her, of course, because I wrote her. But with the pilot season, so as I've said, I've been a writer since I was a little itty bitty person. And writing is something that has been endeared to my heart for a very long time. But when I came out to California, I had the California experience. I came with little, but my dreams, and then everything came crashing down, and I even lost one of my really good friends. And so for a time, I actually stopped writing, and that had never happened to me before. And so I'm not writing, so my core being is not being expressed. And I got into Glee, actually. Because I'm a geek. I love musicals. I love singing. I love drama. I got into Glee, and then I got into the auxiliary shadow world of Glee, which so if you've ever found a TV show that you really like, that you want more and more from the characters, there are these worlds that spring up around them. There's fan fiction about it. There's YouTube videos. There's people who dissect every single relationship on the show to try to figure out who's dating who's in love with who, what actually happened. And we have this, I like to think of it as a cult of celebrity, where we idolize these people, and we want them to be like the characters that they portray on TV, but they're not, and they're real life humans. And so as I kind of wanted to explore that whole idea, I wanted to explore the concept of Hollywood, of not achieving your dreams, of the downside of fame. Because everybody wants fame, but fame wants something from us too, and you can't just get it without having to give something up. And I really wanted to explore that concept, and from that, that's where the pilot season comes from.
Interesting. That is extremely interesting that you could take that life experience and everything around you, and then the transactional nature of fame, and turn it into this work. So the reason I can speak on this work is because I got a little sneak peek, because that's what insiders do. They get sneak peeks of things. And you guys, this is so I never really have anything bad to say about anything that Miss White has written. I have been a fan since day one. And definitely since the fire in the trick. That was it for me. No, actually it wasn't. It was when you decided that you wanted to make love. That was what hooked me. And then I got the book, and I'm always a constant fan of, what are you writing? What are you doing? So we're going to shift gears a little bit, because we've talked about your writing, talked about your books, but what we haven't talked about is your experience as a Black author, a Black female author. What does that even mean to you? Do you understand the gravity of just the essence of who you are, and how you're shaping that?
Well, there's a quote that deals with standing on the shoulders of greats. And I don't pretend that I'm great, but I do remember the first time I read about Black characters in books. And, everyone makes fun of English majors because they break down everything about writing. Why did the author use the color green? Why did the author do this? Why did the author do that? And we make fun of them because it's easy, and two, because sometimes the author just made the color green because they were looking at something out their window. But the thing about writing is that even though the author might not know, or the reader might not know, there are external factors that shape what you do, why you wrote these type of things. And I remember one of the most powerful things is, I used to love The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Narnia series, as a kid. And then as I got older, when I was reading Narnia, in the very last book, The Final Battle, all of the characters are white, because that's C.S. Lewis's world. In the final battle, there was one good non-white person, one, that made it to heaven. And as a kid, that shifts who you are as a Black child. That shifts how you feel about yourself, where you see yourself. What's amazing is that YA is blown up, and you get all these women of color who are writing young adult novels, and they're writing young adult fiction and fantasy. And that's amazing. And I wish I had that as a kid. I know that Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, Cassie Logan, she was my first powerful young Black girl who wasn't a background character. She was dynamic, and she was her, and she owned herself. And from there, I read Octavia Butler and Zora Neale Hurston and Alice Walker, and I loved reading it. I love reading. I love characters. I love character-driven books. And as a woman of color, I love the idea of picking up a book and reading about struggles that I can relate to. One of the comments that I had from one of the people who likes House of Cards is that she said that she had never heard race talked about in that way that I talk about it in the book. Like, you don't see published books with that information. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about how is the future going to see us? Who gets to tell our stories? Who gets to tell how we live and love and learn? And I remember reading about Shonda Rhimes, and how if you go back and you look at Grey's Anatomy and all the characters in the background, our Jane the Virgin was also one of the ones where the subtle things, there were always a mixed couple in the background of Jane the Virgin. There was always a gay couple in the background of Jane the Virgin. And you see people and mixed families look at this, and they see a little bit of themselves. They see that they're not alone. And I think that as people, we feel that we're not alone. We seek that connection to other people in this world, and knowing that there's other people out there who live and love and learn like we do, it gives other people permission. So the more I write as a woman of color, the more women of color's voices will be brought to the table. And if they're not invited we'll make our own tables.
Oh, wow, that's exciting. And so outside of here, and outside of podcasting, what I do for an actual living, there's always conversations about the table, space at the table. So you get the seat at the table. Now, are they serving you? And so I love the idea that Black female authors were like, hey, you can have your table. That's fine. We'll just create our own. And they've created these bountiful spreads that, I'm sorry, I want to gorge myself on. And I want to gorge myself on them because it feels comfortable.
Tyler Perry and what he did. Tyler Perry was told that Black church-going people don't want to see Medea. And I would love to find the person who told Tyler Perry that advice, because that was terrible advice. But we are redefining, and it's not just Black women, it's the literary world itself is redefining what is a book, what is literature, what is literary. Part of getting my MFA is I'm reading memoirs of people. I'm reading different types of books, and there are so many ways to write a book. There are so many ways to tell your story, and everyone does it differently, and it's beautiful. It just seeing how people can, I said earlier about building your own table, but you know what? I'll write on the floor. I have this poem called "Everyone Should Write," and I talk about if you don't have a pen, pick up a stick and just write your words, write your sadness, write your joy. I had this Twitter post that I said a while back, and it actually resonated a lot more than I expected it to. And it's just queer writers, write your queer love stories, write so many that they become tropes, write queer divorce, write queer stories that don't center coming out, write about queer love, queer triumph, queer poverty, queer middle class. We've got a long history to overcome. BIPOC writers, don't forget to center yourselves in your narratives. And that has to be important, because we, as Black people in America, we don't center ourselves in our stories. We explain things to our audience as if they're not part of this world that we're creating. Like we default to white characters. We treat white as the default in our own works. And Toni Morrison has a powerful quote where she's talking about where an interviewer asked her about why she doesn't have white characters in her book. And she's like, would you ask a Russian why they write their Russian novel in Russia with Russian references? And the answer is no. And we don't center ourselves. I think everyone should be the center of their own story.
That is such a beautiful thought, to be the center of one's own story. And I want to thank you for taking the time out to talk to me a little bit more and share your gift. But I want you to leave a gift for other authors, because this is a lot of what this is about, is not only uplifting these voices, but also maybe planting a couple seeds to inspire the next generation to tell the next series of stories. Because, like you said, the world's going to keep turning, and there's always going to be more stories to be told. So what do you say to that one writer who's like, the story is chasing itself around in my head and I just can't seem to get it out? Or I'm not really a writer because I don't this, or I didn't go to college, or I didn't do this, or I didn't do that. What advice do you have for future and up and coming authors?
To that person, to any person, I say write. Just write. Put your words down. No one writes a great first, second, third, or 10th draft. Just get the words down on paper and then edit like there's no tomorrow. Like walk around with a red pen, but walk around with a pen in your hand so that you can capture your world, your life, your fantasy. Write your fantasies. They're no different than anyone else's fantasies. They're no less worth being told. So for anybody who doesn't think that they are a writer, you are a writer. Put your words down on paper. Put your words down on the wall. Just write.
I love that. I love that so much. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been our first about the author. And as you can see, things are going to get really interesting as we bring on different types of authors who write different genres and different kinds of characters and are going to have different motivations and different personalities. And that's what's so great about all of this. But before we go, there's a couple little things you might want to know. So Jacqueline's book can be found on Amazon.
Amazon. Everyone's book is on Amazon. If you Google The White Fence by Jacqueline White, it'll come up. You can get it on barnesandnoble.com, booksamillion.com. You can put it on your Nook, your Kindle, your cell phone. We are in an advanced digital world. If you are looking for something to read on your lunch break, it is less than the cost of your coffee. $3.99 for your Kindle. I highly recommend that you read it. And what I would love even more than you reading it is if you read it and you enjoy it, pass it on.
And what if people want to connect with you, Jacqueline, the writer, because they want to know like more stuff, because her tweets are pretty interesting. Apparently, people love them.
I won't say that, but if you want to connect with me on Twitter, my handle is @written_out loud.
Well, Jacqueline, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. And I want to close with this thing. This space was created specifically for women like you. And I couldn't be more ecstatic to be here and to be able to provide this opportunity, because the stories that you tell help color my world. And then in turn, they're going to help color my children's world. So thank you so, so much for having the courage to just pick up a pen and write.
Thank you for creating the space for people like me to actually talk about what I like to do.
Well, we've got to go. It's been lovely. Let's do this again sometime. Jacqueline, you are welcome back anytime. As a matter of fact, I'm waiting for the pilot season. But ladies and gentlemen, make sure that you go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever you acquire books. You must get The White Fence. You can also get A House of Cards. And keep looking to the western skies, because something will be coming from Jacqueline. We like music.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to show the cover of the book.
Yeah, that
it didn't work because of the background. But if you care to find me, look towards the western sky. Oh yeah. So I admit I am a geek, and I don't pretend that I'm anything other than I'm not. Which, that's another thing that I love about Tracey, is that I got to write her as a geek who is oblivious to the rest of the world. And I like naive characters. I like Black innocence, and we don't really get that all that often.
I'm going to sit with that. I just need to sit with that, with everything going on in the world around us, especially as it relates to just the everyday experience of African Americans, people of color, minorities, period, in this country.
Yeah, I just wanted to end with, even though Tracey's story is set in the 60s, her experiences, you could parallel that to any experience growing up in America at any time period as a young Black woman. The challenges that Tracey faced are the same challenges that young Black women face all the time. And, I just want to encourage you to bring out those stories. So thank you for having this space for you to encourage other women to bring out their stories.
You are so welcome.